Welcome to season 9 of the award-winning Retail Tea Break podcast. My name is Melissa Moore, the retail advisor. I'm a retail educator, trainer and retail conference MC. And each week as your host, I'll be joined by industry experts, retailers and brands to dispel the myths, share their knowledge and give you an insight into the retail industry. You can listen back to previous 8 seasons on your favourite podcast platform or watch us on YouTube. And while you're there, please hit that follow button so that you get to listen first every week. And remember, sharing is caring in the retail industry. Share an episode across any of the platforms with your network. And if you're on social media, tag me, Melissa Moore, and the Retail Tea Break podcast. So in the meantime, grab that cup of tea, sit back and enjoy season 9 of the Retail Tea Break podcast. This episode of the Retail Tea Break is sponsored by AutoAddress, the smarter way to capture addresses and stop delivery issues before they happen. Did you know that around 20% of all shipping addresses entered at the checkout are incorrect or incomplete, leading to failed or delayed deliveries, wasted admin time, lost revenue, and of course, frustrated customers? So whether it's typos, missing information, or messy express checkout data, AutoAddress catches bad addresses before they cost you time, money, or customers. So check out autoaddress.com and try it free for 14 days. Today, I'm joined by someone who knows the UK grocery sector inside out. For over 20 years, he's worked across food retail to make stores better for customers, for store teams, and for the executives driving change. He's the founder of Grocery Insight, a consultancy built on one clear principle: truth-telling. Grocery Insight goes beyond the slides, the KPI dashboards, and the spin to uncover what's really happening on the shop floor. Their work is grounded in one thing: the store visit. They walk the aisles, see what customers see, and record what others can't, or maybe won't. So from helping CEOs and execs see the truth behind their stores to supporting investors, brands and suppliers with real-world insights and a library of over 900,000 images, Grocery Insight helps the industry bridge the gap between strategy and execution. And I am delighted to welcome Steve Dresser, grocery guru and the retail truth teller. Welcome to the Retail Tea Break podcast.
Thank you very much for having me on. I'm delighted to be here.
So look, before we get into it, in the time that it takes to boil a kettle, which I am told is about 2 minutes, maybe it's a bit more up north. I don't know that, but it's about 2 minutes roughly. Tell us a little bit more about you and your background in the retail industry.
Of course, yeah. I think if you've got the electric on, it does. I was just getting to that up here. But yeah, no, so in 2 minutes, blimey, I've always liked the industry, even as a kid, going to different shops. I remember being on holiday in Tenby when I was about 6 or 7 and going to the local Safeway and being amazed. And just every holiday we went as kids, I was interested in shops. I had a paper round. I worked in the shop there when I was a teenager. I've always worked, I've always enjoyed working. But I started working at Sainsbury's when I was 16 as a kid. I still speak to people I worked with in stores, but still recently now, thanking them for all they did, because I was somewhat of a maverick as a youth. And
No, never.
And obviously didn't want to go. I wanted to progress, but not like that. And, politics of the small p and everything else. But I've always enjoyed the trade. I don't think anyone who goes into retail sets out to go into retail. I think it's sort of thing you fall into. I actually leave the industry for a brief period after working for Sainsbury's. I worked in a supply chain role for a chemical company that were very interesting. But then pretty soon I went back into the trade doing mystery shops and all that stuff, and then started writing a blog in 2009. Camera phones came along. Twitter 2009 started, I think, as well. My wife told me to do it, and I did. And then it went from there. I still struggle with what is it you do as a question. I don't really know how to explain it, which is probably to the detriment of the business, but it's very, very difficult. I see things, I observe, and 99% of the time, hopefully I'm right. But it is quite simple in that respect. And obviously, having done it for such a long time, and obviously Twitter followings and stuff, Tesco 2015, probably the big break, if you will, for me. But yeah, that's what I do. Yeah, we walk stores and increasingly tell the truth to people in retail, which is quite an odd commodity to have, I think, which probably sort of sums up where we are as an industry, I think, as well.
I love the observation point that you make because, as you said, we're all shoppers. It's funny because even when I go abroad now, the first thing I want to do is go to a supermarket and run up and down the aisles and see what they've got versus what we've got at home. And I love the fact that you've been doing that since you were a small boy. But the observation thing, of course, Twitter, enormous for you. You're so well known for these kind of quick tweets out, for the images that come with them as well. And to me, you were one of the first to do it, which is what I love because it's it almost feels like it's always been there. But on
Mm.
that then, because you're known for getting into stores and seeing what's really happening, and I'm sure people listening and watching this today are going to realize that you tell it how it is. Like you don't sugarcoat stuff. And I love that honesty as well. What's standing out for you on the shop floor, I suppose for the good or the bad, right now?
Yeah, I think the truth telling isn't something, it's not like an act. It's just, I'm
Mm.
not clever enough to remember if I tell lies to people. So it's just much easier for me just to tell the truth and I can't get mixed up in things. So that's the way that's how I operate. And it's only observation, it's not criticism, as David Potts would always say, observation, not criticism. And that's all it is. Some people do feel criticized. And I am told that people read my tweets and feel quite bruised. And if they've had any encounters with me, certainly people may feed that back. But it's always for the end goal, whoever we work with and whoever we advise is for the customer. And that's me when I walk into shops like anyone else. I just turn up like a customer. I don't tell anyone I'm going in.
Mm.
And that's the beauty of the work we do. And I do. But when we turn up with the camera phone, sure, people may see you. But in reality, we're only assessing like a customer. There's always a reason why there's a stack of crates there, or we haven't filled that bay of, we went for the biscuit aisle for a week. There's always excuses, but the customer doesn't care. The customer isn't interested. And I just said to executives, excusing X, Y, Z. There's no sign outside saying we've had a few problems today, so here's 20% off. It's just not reality.
And actually, on that's a key point there in itself is the fact that I don't care what's wrong with your people or your system. God forgive me for saying, if there are gaps in your shelves and I can't come in to buy what I've come in for today, I'm walking away and you're not getting any money. And surely that's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes you just got to, it's just a case of, you just got to strip away at the layers of things. Like I said, you think about the work we did with M&S, which is a great business. One of the first things I did was follow the planogram and leave the gaps to horrified faces. But I just couldn't understand why anyone wouldn't. Because the customer doesn't want to see we've no cat food, so we've just chucked all this dog food in to make ourselves feel better and not solve anything. Things like that. Someone's just got to be really basic. And sometimes just having the conviction of a plan is enough and actually saying this is what we're going to do. And crucially, we're not going to change our minds in 2 months' time because of X, Y, and Z. I think for me, obviously, we're looking at our images at the minute. We're working on building that as a data set for AI companies. Obviously, we've built the images up, got I think about 1 million over from 2010 to modern day. And I have a team of 3. My brother works with me, and we've got a lady in Scotland who does the store visits up there for us since sort of 2019, 21. So we've started to really propel the pictures, but a lot of them are mine. And we started to organise and structure that. So obviously, I do share some old images. And we all remember the old days as school days are the same. You don't remember the rubbish days. You remember how great it was. And I think we all do that with memories. Over time, we select the best memories and they bubble up. But when I look at retail pictures from then and now, and I've banded them for years about standards, I look at Sainsbury's 2016, Tesco 2015, whatever. It isn't necessarily the standards are better. I think they are, but it's also the fact there's no retail media everywhere. So you just get a much cleaner shopping environment. And I just think for the colleagues now, it used to be a job for life in food retail, but we've had so many restructures and everything down the years. It's incredibly difficult. You can almost get the keys to a department doing X thousands a week without really doing the training these days, conversely. So it's actually easier to progress in some ways. But on the flip side, then there's very few guardrails up if someone does struggle because they've got 5 departments to run. So I do think it's quite a difficult time for the sector. I do look at store standards and think that what's unacceptable has drifted significantly. And it's easy to tell discounters, but discounters run good shops. I don't like to read things about staff being told to work faster or anything like that. I think you've got to look after the colleagues. And again, going back to my time at M&S, probably surprising that initially we had people meeting with people who would come along because we're not sure of the stores. You've obviously been saying things for many years about them and the pictures. Would they be worried? I think by the end, most of the stores that I worked with would be broadly positive. I got about 4 or 5 pages of testimonials, so it was nice. And I think, listen, the work we did was very hard, very successful. And they were put under pressure. We all worked hard and they did it. We had a few bumps, but broadly we were good. But I think they respected and liked the fact that someone would be their voice and basically go off and have a go at the support office on their behalf. Because my view in stores, working on these team days and things, is that central office are often too disconnected. Now that's a bit of a cliche, but they genuinely are. And it's not necessarily their fault. But there is an element in most retailers, I think, where they say, here's the job, and we've probably sorted 60% out. And then that 40% just gets chucked into stores, and then there's people who have to work out what to do. But when the experience goes due to being paid off or whatever, the day job becomes very difficult. And we'd all like to systemize it like a McDonald's, but we all know food retail doesn't work like that because you don't know when the customers are going to come in and it might rain and what if the delivery's late. It basically, how retail's run now on a knife edge within, so you just can't do it. And we've seen time and again, there's no allowance for customer service. These hours models are junk. They just, it's designed purely to take labor out of stores. And when the drumbeat is you just got to work harder, I don't think that's a strategy, personally. I think tech's got to play a part, people have got to play a part, and everything then comes together. But the problem with that is you can say that, but you can't then give that column F on the spreadsheet and the accountants get involved,
It's a tough one, but I actually think you've summed that up really well. There's so much we can unpack there. It's funny you talk about kind of staff costs and labor versus sales there. We had Mark Reesky on the beginning of this season. He is banging the drum for retailers to stop using the method. It didn't work when I was running shop floors 15, 20 years ago. It's still not working. I don't know why we're doing it because, as you say, it's just really easy for the accountants to do it and it's not fair. And we have to look after our people. I mean, look, obviously, as you know, my day job is teaching and training our retail people on the shop floor. And even that starts to get cut. And you know, when that's getting cut, that people don't care about their people. And you know what? If you don't care about your people, you're not caring about your customers, and they can see it. So, yes, we've differentiated here between UK and Irish grocery markets, but I do think we've got the same issues here, spread slightly differently because we are a very different market. But there is so much wrong with such an incredible part of the overall retail industry that it needs to be addressed. And again, because I work with so many retail leaders, not on the level that you did, and certainly not on the level you did at M&S there, but even from a teaching perspective, I've just finished delivering the first module in a retail leadership program that we're running. For you, how are these retail leaders, and you could call them store managers, call them whatever you want in that respect, how do you think they balance these like really short-term, hard-hitting issues, as you said, coming at them day in, day out, whether it's stock fill, whether it's the fact that head office have gone off on one and have some crazy strategy that they know isn't going to match their store or their customers? How are they meant to think strategically and run a store right now?
I think it's incredibly difficult. Again, lived experience with retailers. I was never a store manager. I used to be thrown at me, "Oh, you've never run a store." But I don't think you don't need to be a good horse to be a jockey and all that. I just think you got to look at doing things right. So again, go back to what we did at M&S. When we took the reins, we had 5 shops and we just had to get in. Mark and I remember that we worked together on it, and it was very much, here's the sort of vision, a bit like a manifesto. This is what we'll do. We didn't know a lot, so you couldn't really sort of overpromise, but you would just, and obviously this was in addition to their day job for store managers. So whilst it's nice being part of a trial for the initial 5 and then 15, it's great, but there's a lot of pressure, a lot of visits, and you've got a lot of focus. I didn't share the plan more than a week out because I knew they'd just do the exciting stuff first and forget all the other stuff, which that people couldn't understand. I think they started used to make it up each week. So I was very strict with it, and I literally was really slow and prescriptive because obviously within a retail process like ours, so like anyone, you've got to do it sequentially. And the boring stuff you have to do first, otherwise it just falls apart. And there's always a significant lag as well, I've found. I think certainly within stores, maybe take 6 weeks for the KPIs to go. But having said that, with KPIs, we must have had dashboard after dashboard when we were in situ. I think I had about 4 KPIs, went up to 7. But there were people they were just dead, the KPI for everything. It's almost, you're still with the KPI piece. You could have a shop that was 6 weeks, was drifting off the process. And then suddenly it'd be like, wow, they'd fallen over. But you'd have no indicators. So I think for store managers, in our experience, they had their day job. We gave them a few extra hours, but they had to land everything. And obviously, it was quite intense, and we were getting stuck in, and they weren't used to. I think my visits are quite infamous in terms of just the absolute level of. Everyone will say, they will tell you it's quite wow, but it was always to make things better. And I think I think certainly selling the dream. Once we got traction and the warehouses emptied, and we didn't have loose stock everywhere, and there was a degree of calm. Actually, then the guys felt they could do their job properly and be a bit more strategical because they weren't like firefighting all the time.
Yeah.
What we inherited was systems where it was all reactive and you could almost run around for 8 hours run yourself into the ground, and then go home with a shop that was worse than when you started. So those sort of things then just play on everyone's mind. Sickness is a given in every retailer. Absence. You've got colleagues who are quick, slow. You'd always have the best squad, whatever. And all we try to do is just bring a level of standardization to say, look, if you do these processes, if you do your gap scan every day, if you do all these things and work your delivery, real basics actually. But you know what? That's okay. And these golden rules, your life can and will be better. And when we got the stores through it, they were absolutely, they were thinking strategically around stores, service improved, not just the figures like shrinkage, but things like service. And we all felt a little bit more relaxed. Then when you get to Christmas, obviously it's incredibly busy everywhere, but specifically, I mean, that's really, really busy. The stores then were sort of really wanted to get through Christmas because they liked the control when they got back on process. But the reality, the shops normally know, or in fact, normally they do know. The shops in every retailer now will know what's wrong. They will know in their operation what's wrong. They will know that some things they're being asked to do aren't right. Some of them will be doing things such as, I don't know, gap scanning without working a delivery info. They will know that's wrong, but they will be doing it because of the culture of KPIs and someone's going to rain hell down on us. And again, that's a weak culture, is that. You've got to run it where it was a bit easier for me because I wasn't directly employed, so I could be a bit different. But my view was always stick your hand up. If it's not works out for you, I'd rather you're honest and say we haven't done it today because of X, Y, and Z. Sometimes their stories get stretched a little bit, but broadly, that's the cultural piece, isn't it? And your point on training is so true. The minute we start looking at stores as an expense line is a real challenge, because it's always amazing to me that you've got retailers who know the customer's the most important person, but then we send these people in over the hill with a cutting knife and the wrong name badge and a shirt don't fit. And everyone's quite happy with that. And you're thinking it's just such a bizarre way to operate when you think about it. But then marketing will send some coupons out because the customers haven't been in for a while. And that's like the answer, rather than just thinking, let's sort things out. So frontline staff, yeah, very difficult. And it's easy for people to go into stores. You're right, I was one of the first. I'm quite innovative, actually, with my sort of approach. I used to get asked all the time, do give you permission? And I just say, what are you talking about? I'm not 28 days notice, I can come in. Don't be silly. But now a lot more people do that, don't they? A lot of people go into stores. Few people see the stores, I would say. There are very few who actually see the stores for what they are. So I think that's a challenge as well, because 15 years now on this, if it's warm and you see a chiller that's empty, it's either broken down or the burgers have blown out. And we now have people who will take a picture of that and say, look at me. I think that the challenge for me with the good is often it's like people used to hammer me for saying, well, you're just negative all the time, Steve. And I am generally quite cynical, so that's just how I am. But celebrating the good is celebrating the good. When I came to Ireland, if you look back, we're very praiseworthy of the market. It was superb. 40 minutes from here on a plane, it's like a different world. But people in the UK used to want me to celebrate like we filled the shop, as in we get the bunty now, and it's like that's just your job. I know it's not like Roy Keane, but that is your job. The good is availability check 100% or for 6 weeks. It's that sort of thing. So I think we've got to be careful as well that we don't start celebrating people that want to start celebrating mediocrity. We let the acceptable bar drop so much. I think back to Tesco in the dark days when they used to just send me abuse on Twitter all the time, and they would have hashtag 13 out of 10, and they'll be stood grinning with a box of Thorntons in front of the one full display in the shop. And everyone who went into Tesco would be like, this is when they're in Philip Clark and they were in trouble. And you'd be like, the shops are never designed. You're so disingenuous. But they were just in an echo chamber talking to themselves. And you see a lot of that on LinkedIn, where there's certain retailers in the US and the UK who are they're in an echo chamber in a way, and they're just talking to themselves. And the worst retailers sometimes just talk to themselves or talk to the customers. And for me, that's the worst, because you look at it, and I look at it objectively and think, okay, things clearly aren't going well for whoever. Anyone can sense that with the press, whatever. But when they're all sort of stood grinning, saying how great it is, you think, did they really believe that? Now, some will, some won't. You've got to have a picture. But then I always find that when it falls apart, and there'll be a trigger, like the CEO will get the bullet, or the results will be terrible or something, the leaders of that business then got to stand in front of people. They've told everything's fine, and then come up with a plan to recover. But they've already been telling everyone it's fine, everything, and they're just having a go at us and this, that, and the other. So I think culturally, it's very difficult with culture to get that balance right between supportive and encouragement and a drive for results and customer care. Almost they all conflict with each other. You've got to be nice, and you have to do it. You have to get more out of people without paying them more, unfortunately, because that's just the industry. It's not a well-paid industry.
There are ways. And I think you've meant, and I've written that down a few times, you've said that word culture a few times now. So whether it's within the store environment, whether it's that kind of senior C-suite environment, wherever it is, I genuinely think it feels quite toxic across the board at the moment. Look, and I've been in it, you've been in it, I have worked in that environment. Sickens me, it made me ill. I could tell a million and one stories. We could have a whole podcast season on how awful retail culture can be. But it doesn't make it okay. It doesn't make it okay if you're a store manager running a store and that's god awful culture is there. It doesn't make it okay if you're in C-suite. It is hard out there, and we know it is. Recruitment and retention is hard. This pay issue is getting worse by the year, it feels. Backfilling, just getting stock into stores can be a nightmare, and we know this, but it doesn't mean that you can't be a bit, and I'm going to put this nicer in inverted commas. There are ways around this because some retailers are doing really well. They treat their people well. There is an open and honest culture, whether it's an educational culture, a training culture, the succession planning in place. Like, it isn't all bad, but a lot of it is right now. And it's not okay. And I genuinely think it is impacting the customers. And nobody wants to talk
Yeah.
about that because we all say we're customer centric. And it's just a bit icky. I know that's not a right word, but it's
Well, it
not
is,
okay.
and it is, and I think I'm harping about culture. I think if I look back, there were probably times where it wasn't quite right on my behalf, and there were times where people infer your message in a different way. And I think your store visits in a different way, or and this is whoever I've worked with, you get a reputation, and people have a you can't do a fireside chat every week. And
Yeah,
I used to say on Twitter, it's not a public service. You know, BBC, I have to tell them where I've been.
absolutely.
So I think there's a balance with that, and people will infer what they want to
Yeah.
infer. I think people who work with me will say that, yeah, I'm firm but fair, and I have a belief in. I think you've got to stand for something as you stand for nothing, and if you allow it, you encourage it. So for me, I've always had this sort of utopian view, and I'll take the absolute extreme opposite view to what's happening because you've got to believe that something's better. You've got to
Yeah.
make something better. And if we'd have turned up at any of the businesses we work with and said, you know what, guys, things are all right here, they'd
Yeah.
be like,
Well
well,
done.
okay, good. Yeah, thanks very much, see you later. And things can't be. That's the beauty of that. That's why the trade appeals to me so much, is because the job's never finished. There's always something else to improve. And I think, it's so tough. My kids are growing up now as well. And you look at when I was 16 starting in Sainsbury's, there was a path for you up the career ladder,
Yeah.
whether you wanted to work in shops forever or not. Some people were like, they were there for uni and that were that. Other people were like, fell into it and there for a long time. But yeah, the industry's taught me so much. And my career path is not something anyone could really replicate because I can't explain it myself. But you've just got to have conviction in what you're saying. And I've been pretty consistent for 15 years, really. And I've put into practice what I've preached, both analysis and emails and suggestions from better ways to do things from other retailers or indeed the M&S program. And it's surprising when you think about the troops, as I call them, in shops, where to get the message through to them as well is incredibly difficult because the amount of communication that comes out, and I was quite infamous in M&S for my communication, but I just thought you can never do too much. You've got to be the friend. You've got to relay things that you see, not just walk in. I mean, it's easy enough to walk into shops as some do and just kick the shop apart. There's no skill in that. You've got to unpick it. Very rarely is it a shop that they're all having a laugh in the back and
Yeah.
the shop's ablaze. It's just not the case. I remember going back 20 years at Sainsbury's, the regional manager would walk in, and if produce was bad, he would say, I can see you're having a few issues, I'll come back later. And that was like the worst thing he could say, because he wouldn't be coming back to give you time. You'd have to sort things out, then he'd boot everyone around the shop. So I've never done that, but you walk in sometimes to a shop and you think, oh, there's something not right here. But equally, the ones that interest me as much are the ones who are trying to hide it all as well. There's elements there where you think, why are you hiding? Because you always
That's
find it.
fear, isn't it? There
I
is a
think so,
fear there.
yeah. And I think again, it takes no skill to be fear driven. You've got to inspire. It's very difficult to inspire people. I think you've got to have a little bit of charisma. You've got to have be a bit different. For people in retail today, it's incredibly difficult, isn't it? Because you said customer care. We were in Asda on Saturday, and there was a colleague, bless her, on the kiosk. We were at the self-serve, as everyone is these days, so many self-serve checkouts, and waiting for the weights to go off again. Because once you buy super noodles that aren't quite heavy enough, one of the kids sits on the self-checkout, which both happened. She was on the kiosk, the colleague, there was a person down. There's always a person down. And she was, bless her, and she came over, two of us are waiting, must be waiting 2 minutes plus. However, the interesting thing is she apologised. And that was the end of it. Because once she apologises,
Yeah.
apologies for your wait, and then that's it. What upsets, I think, and I've said this for a long time, what upsets customers is where they don't sense there's any urgency. So she'd already told us. I think that's why Aldi and Lidl did so well and do so well now, is because when you go shopping, and when you went shopping before they became really mainstream and you were like in the box with a few checkouts, because no one ever used to go in, Because you obviously, before like they became popular, you could go in at any time and you'd get your shopping. There'd be no one in the store. And then the person would be on the beer aisle, like filling up, and then come off, they'd run up
Yeah.
and serve you, then go back off. Before they became like mainstream, we were busy all the time. But where they were popular, we didn't have enough checkouts and stuff like that, is because the customer always got a sentiment of someone moving and helping. So you would, even before the tannoy, they'd be telling people running, charging down to serve you, but they'd tell you to put this stuff on the belt and all that stuff. And that's what the discounters do brilliantly. And I think you look at the discounters and you can say what you like about them, but I think how they've approached things it's a very different model. It's a bit like rugby league, rugby union. It's the same game, but different rules. How they've approached it and landed that in their playbook, you can only admire. And I think fundamentally it took retailers too long to react. I think we all agree with that in the UK. Tesco did a good job in Ireland before Tesco UK adopted some of the ideas, but it took us too long to react. And the colleagues have been in the firing line. Everyone's doing more with less now. And I think some things I look and think they must be going through the cracks. Things like products out of date, queues, all these elements. And I think then you've got some retailers who use NPS, which is a bust. That's a waste of time as well, because we all know that they just put markers ever asking for feedback. Plus, I always think these measures around customer feedback are very unfair because disaffected customers then feel empowered to complain anyway. And often you get complaints that's completely out of your remit. It's a bit of a race to the bottom. But those who run the best shops win. And I think it's very hard for us here we all know, don't we? Things like store environment, if it's brightly lit, standards, no one wants to shop in a bin. All those things are really important to customers. But we can't really quantify the impact. But the accountants can quantify the payroll. And that's the challenge we face. No one wants to run art galleries, but yeah, there is a middle there. But you've got a lot of people in the productivity, efficiency, retail ops world who are just looking at numbers and don't really understand what's going on day to day.
So come here, quick fire then, because I'm loving this, and we could definitely talk all day because there's so much in your experience, whether it's at M&S, whether it's obviously back at Sainsbury's there. But I want your take on some of these because I think you might scare a few people, but it's coming from the right place. What's one trend that you think everyone's overhyping that you'd love to see the back of? Go for
Retail media.
it.
Retail media. No, I don't think retail. I think the UK marketing agency and Co's sense of what retail media is overhyped. But we've seen elements of this where I obviously banged the drum religiously about it being bad for shoppers and customers and stores, actually. And then we saw some of the agencies start to back away from it because obviously as they were heavy on it and then pulled right back. So clearly that's not the future. Alan's come in and changed that. We all knew it was there to prop up the bottom line. And despite it being rolled in with loyalty and all these other things, I think I was at a conference in Germany and I was brought along essentially at the end just to threaten everyone with some pictures of how wrong the UK has gone. And we had retailers and suppliers talking about data and how they're going to personalize at scale. And then you look at our market, we've just put printed signage everywhere. And we've had this culture on LinkedIn then where they're all just outdoing each other. I don't think there's some of the suppliers really know what to do anyway. So they're just all outdoing each other with front of store displays. So that's a really big one. And then tech as well. I did a bit of tech with M&S and a lot of it was store facing apps to make the process work. I really struggle with tech companies who think that retail is just so basic and simple that we can just plug an app in of their latest software and everything's going to be sorted. Retail cannot work where you've got to go pick the back stock or the overstock or whatever every 15 minutes. Yes, there's systems that can tell you there's a gap in every 15 minutes, but there's no one around to do that. Also, it'd be like a soul-destroying job. What if it's wrong? The minute that system's wrong and doesn't work, whatever anyone in the office thinks, the store opt out. And that's the problem with the consistency element of it. And then so many retailers are putting this tech in. It's sold to them as a labour saver, otherwise they wouldn't do it. So tech is a good thing and some really good stuff out there. AI is going to be fantastic, but it needs the good data. There's no point doing it without the good data because it'll just 100%. Hallucinate. So yeah, I think some of those tech solutions really worry me. And I think this culture, Morrison's have been about this productivity measure. And I think that's a really dangerous route to go down, using tech to essentially say that people aren't working hard enough. Retail's a tough job and it isn't as easy as saying there's a pallet, 40 minutes. Aldi can do it to an extent because they're very formulaic. You've got customer service, you've got exactly. All these elements, haven't you? And customer service, because it's quite elastic, that generally in the labour measurement world just gets binned off. And then we're wondering why no one's taking the customers to where the pickle is. Or they're just like shouting them down the aisle. It's because we don't have the time. And once you take the tension out of the model, it's hard work to do it, but someone's got to get stuck in like we did and said, okay, we're going to start here. We need to do all the plumbing. We need to get everyone on board. We need to do it and fix things as we go. Otherwise, it's never going to work because there's always going to be pressure on the labour budget. We all live on planet Earth. We all understand that. But it's got to come from the right areas, and we can't just keep chipping away. And I think some labour models now, they mustn't even, probably like we do under the Trade Descriptions Act, they wouldn't even reflect what the world looks like because they don't measure stuff. And then but they're always there to chip away, aren't they? They'll always find something to chip away. I just think it's the worst. And I think must be hard for store managers who they can't get around their shop. They're not given the tools to do the job, whether it's equipment. I mean, some of the equipment is a disgrace in most retailers, whether it's that or bodies, people.
Yeah.
And it's the impossible job. It truly is. And then you get, now because the tech's come on, you can get analyzed on everything. So it's like the worst of both worlds. We've almost got all this analysis that should be telling people, right, we need some more people in shops and run the shops better. Instead of it just some guy, lady, whoever, with a badge on just gets grief. And you can't run it like that. People have got to be given hope, and
Absolutely.
they will then do their best work. And if they don't then do their best work, then that's different, isn't it? But I think too often we go down a performance route in the trade, and I just think there's good people who were then taking our performance route, but they were like great a year ago. And I just think the balance isn't right in too many. I know there's pressure, but it's to your point, who's looking at the strategic outlook, or is it just panic every quarter? It's probably panic every quarter.
Absolutely. And on that joyous note, my final question then. We're heading obviously towards the end of 2025. What's coming up next for you and I suppose the team at Grocery Insight as we head into 2026?
Well, that's a good question. We've also got an extensive AI or an extensive image library, sorry, that sort of spans
Phenomenal.
15 years. Yeah, we built it just before COVID, actually. We started to archive it, and obviously then as AI's come along, machine learning and all this stuff, it's there for a different time. So we're talking to some academic institutions about using the data to either work on their own AI expansion doctorates, or they're using it to plot versus results, see any correlation, things like that. So there's definitely something in that space for us. And we'd like another big project, of course we would. Probably won't be here, I wouldn't have thought. You never know. But something along the ilk of what we did at M&S would be good. That said, it was an incredibly challenging program. It took a lot out personally, as these things do often. So yeah, I think we're just gonna keep chugging along. I think the challenge for us is, like we said before, it's, if people want to hear the truth about their business, then it's a great working relationship. If people don't, then it doesn't really work. So, I will keep doing what I do. I don't think it'd be disingenuous for me to do anything else. I'm not going to start saying, look at how great all this is, unless it really is great, in which case I will, but it's going to be more of the same. And just, pointing things out to people, getting people to think, actually, yeah, that's a good point. Why is there a 2p gap on the spaghetti hoops in Asda? So things like that, really. So for us, the image data set's quite a big priority. And it's a new world AI, but I think for us personally, it's seeing who can do what with it. But the fact it spans so many years, and we've got good quality pictures, AI needs to learn. And a lot of the recent technology is purely what they've put into stores. So because we've got such a massive archive. So that's basically a lot of the focus at the minute. But yeah, we'll just keep chugging along and we'll keep calling things out. But I think, to be honest with you, we're calling more and more out these days than we ever have. And it's hard to see where the light bulb's going to go off for some to think we need to run better shops. But the problem is the cost. Yeah, I think it's basically that.
Amazing. I am so pleased that you've had such an honest, open conversation today because it's a rarity to have you on a podcast. So I'm thrilled that you chose this one to talk to me on because I just do. I think there are so many insights there and it's coming from the right place. It's not always what people want to hear, but I think there's an issue in that itself. So look, if you've enjoyed today's podcast episode, please genuinely do share it across the various platforms and across social media and obviously internally with your colleagues as well. If you're on social media, do tag me, Melissa Moore, and the Retail Tea Break podcast. You can listen back to all 8 previous seasons. There's over 100 episodes there across retail verticals that you can listen to. You can watch us over on YouTube, of course, and subscribe to the Retail Tea Break. Connect with myself and Steve on LinkedIn if you haven't already. You'll obviously find him over on X, where he is phenomenal at telling it how it is. And I'll obviously share the details for Grocery Insights in the show notes. Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure today. Thank you
Likewise.
so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
thank you again to AutoAddress for sponsoring today's episode. AutoAddress powers faster checkouts and more accurate deliveries by fixing bad address data before it becomes a problem. So check out autoaddress.com and try it free for 14 days.